Welcome back to my podcast. We're on episode 61. I had been a super skinny kid with super round dimpled cheeks since I was little. Discovering that I could sneak eat naan khatais around the age of 12 was what finally started my body to fill out. Within a year, I had rounded hips but also a round paunch. This looked very weird on my otherwise well proportioned body, just a paunch sticking out. The PT sir noticed this and during our annual weight and height measuring session advised me not to gain more weight. At this time, in 8th standard, my weight was 52 kg or around 114 pounds. I already had an inferiority complex due to being very average in academics and sports performance in school, as opposed to my sister, who was a leader in both. I got further confirmation of my low self-worth from sports as well as academic teachers who would assume I was as brilliant as my sister, then look confused as it dawned on them that I was not. So they would ask me to do a trial for a leadership position, for instance, in marching. And then they would realize that I was not up to it. And I used to see their faces change and it kind of would break my heart. So now in addition to all that, I also had a belly. Yay! In my mind, a person could only be confident if they had the perfect body, hair, face, skin, intelligence, strength, general knowledge, the list goes on. I equated confidence with the presence of these traits and assumed that everyone who did not have these knew their place in the pecking order and stayed humble. Whenever I came across anyone who seemed self-assured, despite not seeming to have these traits, I just assumed they knew something I didn't, like somehow they were super brilliant in some field or had some other exaggerated quality that made up for the lack of the others. Otherwise, how could they be so confident? This assumption stayed with me for the longest time and affected how accurately I could understand people, which is not very accurately at all. This is how I found myself in a situation later on when I misjudged who my husband was and took him at face value. As soon as my PT sir casually mentioned that I shouldn't put on more weight, I became acutely aware of my belly. I started reading up about healthy foods and exercise. Mind you, this is the time before Google or the internet. So I got my information from newspapers and magazines. Mom was supportive of my endeavor and indulged me when I had a specific diet request, such as eating an early dinner in the evening instead of an evening snack and then dinner later. Nothing seemed to affect the round paunch. In junior college, which is 11th and 12th, I had a crush make fun of my paunch while also hitting on me simultaneously. He grinned and said, "Your stomach is so big." I felt so embarrassed and I doubled my efforts to flatten my tummy. During this time, Bernadette, one of the Anglo-Indian neighbors, had a cousin visit from the US. And that cousin brought an aerobics exercise chart for Bernin because Bernin was roly-poly. It was an A3 or A2 size sheet, magazine size, glossy and colorful, with detailed instructions for every exercise along with an instructor showing the poses. The glossy sheet opened out into a huge window-sized poster that you could put up on your wall, look at and follow the regimen. Bernadette was generous and kind enough to lend it to me for several weeks. I read up every word and started following the exercise regimen religiously. When Bernin needed the exercise chart back, I made a black and white Xerox of the entire poster and sellotaped the sheets together to resemble the sheets in the poster. Not as good as the original, but good enough to guide me until I got the whole regimen by heart. Afterwards, on early morning TV, broadcasts included aerobic sessions with instructors. I would be so inspired and enthusiastic about these that I would immediately stand up and join in those aerobic sessions. Any exercise on morning TV, be it yoga, aerobics, I would do it wholeheartedly. Then I started recording those videos and doing the exercises as and when I could. My family could see how determined and interested I was, and they had never seen me this way. Exercise became my first priority and everything else in my day was planned around it. The desire to exercise became stronger and coincided with the diagnosis of my anemia. I was a 12-year-old that got heavy periods every 15 days, and that was not normal. Once again, my parents took me to doctors to figure out what was going on. And finally, one doctor came through for us, Dr. Bhatia from the Godrej Hospital. He got the blood test done and started me on iron supplements. Within a year, my academics and sports performance started improving. Of course, it was not as good as being treated in infancy, but good news for me nevertheless. Later, when I went from scoring in the 50s and 60s in terms of percentage to getting 79% during my 10th standard board exams, I was very proud of myself. Just like other students who performed well, I took sweets to the school to distribute them among my teachers. Wadbai, our Marathi teacher, asked me my percentage while taking the sweet. Very proudly, I said 79%. However, seeing the confused look on her face, I started feeling doubtful about being so happy about my score. So it was not always malice that affected how I felt about myself. Sometimes it was just deep-rooted beliefs expressed very subtly and innocently by people that kept reminding me that I was not good enough, not as good or as worthy as everybody else. Nevertheless, I was determined to evolve and make myself a better person in every possible way, spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally. I decided to do everything possible to become the best version of myself. I put all efforts in that direction, including introspecting, journaling, tracking my expenses, working out regularly, praying, meditating, reading up about spirituality, studying, and staying disciplined. I channeled my time and efforts in a focused manner until I started seeing results. When I was in senior college, my commute was a 90-minute one with multiple train and bus changes, and classes started at 8 am. I would be on the train at 6:30 am for that 8 o'clock class. Despite this, I would wake up at 5 or 5:30 with a lot of encouragement from Ruby and complete my exercise first, then take a cold shower, then rush to get dressed, grab a freshly made paratha and be off to college. For reasons best known to her, my mother did try very hard to disrupt my exercise routines. There was an entire summer vacation where she wouldn't let me exercise. This reminded me of how she wouldn't let me read in summer vacations. Whenever I was about to exercise, she would say she needed me and I should help her with meal prep or something like that. If I tried to exercise as soon as I woke up, which would be around 7 am, she would still object, saying she needed me in the kitchen. One day I woke up at 6:30 thinking today she won't object. It's the vacation and I'm getting up at 6:30 to work out. But she still objected, saying you need to help me in the kitchen now. If you wanted to work out, you should have woken up earlier than this. Something snapped in me then. I was furious. I realized that the more submissive I was, the more my mom bulldozed me. She could not see that I was a good kid and was trying my best to please her. She always demanded more and more and more. If you were good, you were not smart enough for her. If your scores improved, you were not just or street smart enough for her. Nothing was enough. I was always lacking. Molly, on the other hand, got away with everything. She was the rebel who did not let anyone bully her. So Molly did nothing around the house, went out when she felt like, watched TV whenever she felt like. So Molly was enjoying her life and had full freedom, whereas I was being oppressed because I was trying to be cooperative. My mind went back to when I woke up very early one morning and decided to study. This was a few years before this. Because that is what mom would approve of, I thought. So I kept studying and waiting for the rest of the family to wake up. How pleased mom would be, I thought, to wake up and find me studying. I waited and waited and waited. No one stirred. I looked at the clock. 6 became 6:30, 6:30 became 6:45, it was going to 7. I wondered when they would wake up. And then it was almost 7. Mom finally stirred. I smiled thinking I'll get praised now. Immediately, mom looked at the clock and started yelling at me. If you were awake, why didn't you wake us? We are so late now. I did not get that pat on the back that I was hoping for. Another time, when I was serving food for everybody, I saw that the rice had gotten burnt. Having been brought up to believe in self sacrifice and thinking of others first, I gave everyone else the unburnt rice and served myself burnt rice. I thought this time surely mom will praise me. Mom looked at my plate, made this face and said, "Tu kinni buddhu hegi," which translates to how pathetic you are. I did not know what to feel. I just gave her a weak smile. I also remembered the time when we were little and mom had told dad, "मैं एक कुड़ी नू घरे रख लैनी आ काम कराउण लई." Meaning, I'm thinking of keeping one of my daughters at home instead of sending her to school so that she can help around the house. Now I had realized at some level that mom probably did not have my best interest at heart. But my ingrained programming was still to trust my parents' word as being the words of wisdom. Besides, I was very obedient no matter what. That was my programming. With all the spiritual teachings asking to give up ego and surrender, I became a doormat, letting everyone walk all over me. But one thing I did was try and defy my mom when it came to workouts. I kept working out diligently from the age of 14 onwards. Initially, I would measure my waist, but then I just stopped. I believed in karma kar phal ki mat soch. But I did have the underlying craving for an absolute flat belly and always focused on health and fitness in whatever I did. One day, when I was coming back from college, a neighbor from Godrej Colony complimented me on my weight loss and fit look. I was happy. But this was not enough for me. My belly was still not completely flat. I wanted my belly to become so flat that not a millimeter was popping above the pelvic line. One day, when I was 19 and went for my shower, I was pleasantly surprised when I realized that my belly was as flat and firm as it could possibly be, not a millimeter of extra flesh on it. I had the upper abdomen muscles pop out and then dip at the lower abdomen, forming a beautiful shape like the abdomens of cheetahs. I realized that with years of exercise and conscious eating, as well as some blessings from the genes, I had become a young woman with a perfect body, perfect hair, perfect skin. I had read an article, again pre-Google times, about what constitutes good legs, and my legs checked all the boxes. My breasts were very beautifully shaped and full at a C cup, and most important of all, my abdomen had become completely flat, just as I had wished. My hourglass figure, with the swells and dips at the right places, far exceeded my expectations. And when I saw myself in a swimsuit for the first time, I was transfixed at how amazing I looked. I had worked very hard to attain this body, and it was my big pride. This achievement, this accomplishment was all my own. I was ridiculed and belittled for many things, but this, my body transformation, was all my own. I was so proud of this. That's all for now. I'll tell you about my first crush next time. Till then, stay safe, stay healthy. Bye for now.